For somebody just getting into it, part one, I would recommend starting with the New Testament, Matthew, reading Matthew through Judas. Part two would be to pick up with the Old Testament in the beginning, Genesis, reading it through Malachi. That would be part two. And then the final piece would be to go back to the book of Revelations in the New Testament. Those would be the three pieces. And the reason for starting with the first piece, basically, which is the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is because those four books, very interestingly enough, what they do is, through four different people, corroborate the life and existence of Christ, number one. Number two, how he died / crucified. And number three, where he was actually buried, and the fact that 3 days later, as he prophesied, he would rise from the dead.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why is it important for people to read the Bible, study the Bible, understand the Bible? What does it really, how does it help people?
Very good point. Because unlike any other, call it for lack of better description, system of faith, if you will, right? Which is kind of a man's description, which doesn't do it justice, right? Like you take Buddhism, Shintoism, Hinduism. You take the religion of the Muslim religion, right? Allah and Muhammad, etc. Pagan religions prior to those, none of them, not one of them, and you can look it up and research it, don't take my word for it, claim that there was a Son of God, that he actually came to earth in man's form, lived, preached, actually performed miracles, was crucified on the cross for our sins, and then said, before he predicted he would be crucified, and then he also said that, oh, by the way, when I am put in the tomb, I will rise 3 days later, and in fact did that. Nobody can claim that.
Well, most people couldn't even tell you what the significance of that is.
Well, the significance, again, of starting with the New Testament, in particular Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is that it not only tells you about, how he came to earth, lived as a man, performed miracles, by the way, in front of dozens and dozens and eventually hundreds of eyewitness accounts, but also predicted or prophesied that, he would be crucified, he would be laid to rest, and the fact that at the third day he would rise. All of which happened. And by starting there, you also understand and learn about the New Covenant, which is the New Testament, right? I mean, God originally gave us the Old Testament, Dave, right? And the 10, call it, laws or guidelines to live by. But he eventually gave us call it the New Testament, because he knew that man could never fulfill basically the Old Covenant, right? That we were sinful by nature, we would never fulfill it. Okay, so basically his son had to come through the New Covenant and the New Testament and basically bail us out for our own sins and inequities, basically.
What if Jesus never came?
That's a very good point. That's a good point. Where would we be? I don't know.
There'd be no Christianity, right?
Well, actually, the Christianity. He is the basis of Christianity. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, that's true.
Hence Christ in Christianity.
he is the basis of it. But basically, Christianity's ultimate roots, though, is Judaic.
Well, and probably part pagan as well.
I mean, you're right. The Old Testament, right, was written in Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Greek. The Hebrews gave us the Torah, right? And if you're not familiar with what the Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
Well, that's very interesting. What Matthew, Luke, John, Paul, all of them. I mean, those guys understood Greek?
I guess so. The thing to keep in mind is that these were eyewitness accounts. That's why you want to start with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These were eyewitness accounts written by different men that basically corroborated the same information, that yes, there was in fact a man named Jesus Christ actually lived. We actually hung around with him for about 3 years, literally, were his disciples. We actually saw, we were there, we saw him perform miracles unequivocally in front of our eyes. And then he also prophesied that he would be crucified, which he was. And he also said, upon me being crucified and dying, I will rise on the third day, which they saw.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they didn't have video cameras back then.
Well, they didn't need it because they had a couple of dozen soldiers that guarded his tomb that literally couldn't give an explanation as to what happened. He rose with them there. On top of that, there were a couple of hundred women that went to his tomb that were eyewitnesses to it. It found the massive rock moved and that he was gone. And so at that point, they wrote this stuff down. And that's what the beginning of the New Testament is. It's an eyewitness account of partially. It also is Jesus' teachings, but on top of it, the eyewitness account of how he lived, how he died, and how he rose on the third day.
People who don't believe, they could just say that, they paid off the Roman guards and took his body. That's all.
They could, but the problem is that there were dozens and dozens of people other than the Roman guards that were eyewitness accounts too. So those few guards that you could have paid off, you would have had to pay off a couple of hundred people on top of it.
Well, we let's not waste our time debating that, because eyewitness testimony is not very reliable, especially if you get somebody who looks like somebody, and back then everybody had a beard and a mustache, so everybody kind of looked alike. Dab some blood on your cloak, and all of a sudden people are like, oh my God.
Well,
yeah, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, I suppose you could say that, but the fact that four guys, and then well past those four guys, basically all corroborate the same thing.
Well, I know, but today it would be like four guys who lost their job or lost their leader. All of a sudden they need an income, so they figure they'd start this cult and make some money off it.
Yeah, maybe you could argue it that way, but
yeah, Cynic's definitely.
What do you say? What do you say to the dozens and dozens of accounts where he performed numerous miracles? How do you get around that? There weren't magicians. He wasn't a magician.
All of those miracles can be easily explained if you're a cynic.
Oh, okay. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. If you think about it, the only one that really, off the top of my head, that really can't be explained is...
my suggestion is for people that haven't read the Word, in particular the New Testament and the first four Gospels, they need to do that before first being a cynic, because usually a lot of people, shoot it down and they talk about doubt, and I doubt whatever. Well, my first question is, have you ever read it? And 99 out of 100, the answer is like no. They got time for everything else to watch sports and everything else, and read the funnies and watch Fox.
What is a simpler way to explain why Jesus had to come down when he did? And why did he have to take the form of man? Why did he have to be sacrificed? What is the bearing on man for all of that?
That's a good point. He could have come down being the Messiah. He could have come down any way he wanted, right? He could have come down in the most powerful, omnipresent way. But if you think about it,
people would believe automatically if he was floating around in a cloud, right? Striking people down and.
I guess, yeah.
Well, I mean, let me ask you a question, Dan. If some guy came up to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, I'm Jesus Christ," and then would you believe it if he said that to you, or would you believe it if he levitated a car off the ground then? Or is that more like Superman? But you know what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. I mean, initially, no, I wouldn't believe it. And now keep in mind now, the 12 apostles, Dave, were like you and I. They were just regular men. You know, Paul was like a burly fisherman that swore all the time and had a bad temper and used to like punch people out, literally.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the people he chose were really common, regular people. Matthew, I think, was a tax collector, which was considered back then. If you were a tax collector, you were like almost Satan himself. So, you know, he just chose regular run-of-the-mill people, fishermen and everything. And you know, the apostles like us, flesh and blood and men like you and me, at first they were like, really? Who is this guy? You know, how he talks and the way he comes across. I mean, is this guy for real? Really? But then as they started to hang out with him more and get to see him in action, if you will, then it was like, wow,